The following is a production of the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network.
Welcome back to UFHL Now. I'm your host, Kyle Hall. It is trade deadline day. My phone's been buzzing all day. I think trades are still trying to leak through now here. We have Mr. Insider Larry Fisher coming on a little bit to break down all the trades. Right now, we were at 7 deals already for the day. We've had 15 come in from our last episode. So teams are definitely grabbing what they can before the deadline as they position themselves for a playoff run or a regular season title here coming up. But before we get into the trade action, let's bring you the latest standings in the UFHL. We have still the Royals at the top spot there with the Titans tight on their tail. Just 46 points separate the top 2 teams there. That is going to be an epic battle until the very end. Really, the only change in the top 10 this week was the Yetis jumping from the 11th spot to the number 9 spot, and Red Army dropping from number 9 to 11. So the top 10 remain unchanged other than the Yetis there at number 9. You still have the Royals, Titans, West Coast Express, the Grizzlies, and Stingrays there in your top 5. Rock Republic, Ice Vikings, and Gators round out the top 8. And then when you look down, as we look at through the top 16 teams as they battle for playoff position, the Bentley Jacks jumped up 1 spot to number 15, with the Stallions dropping down to 16. But again, only, I believe it's 6 points. Yeah, under 6 points separate those 2 teams. But again, the race that we're looking at here, you look between the difference between the Yetis to Can West Generals. Really, there's only less than 30 points separate all those teams from 9 all the way through 12. So those 4 teams are really battling it out there. Now let's take a look at where the playoff matchups stand right now. The Allen Conference, you see the Grizzlies and the Stallions matching up there in the Red Army and Can West Generals. And then the Stingrays and the Battlehawks there with the Ice Vikings and Yetis holding on to that 3rd spot there. So your wildcard teams, you have the first wildcard in the Battlehawks, and the Stallions are now holding on to that wildcard 2 spot. The Grizzlies holding down the number 1 spot, and the Stingrays the number 1 spot in the other division there in the Allen Conference. Now, the Legends Conference, the Royals holding down the 1 spot, and the Titans holding down the other 1 spot there. The Outlaws and Bentley Jacks are the 2 wildcard teams. Outlaws, the number 1 wildcard, and the Bentley Jacks, number 2 wildcard. But other than that, not much change this week. It's the same 16 teams as we had last week. Just a little change in some of the seating and the standings there. But overall, those are your top 16 teams and playoff matchups going forward. Now let's take a look at who's hot and who's not this week. Let's start off with our who's hot list first. Our number 1 who's hot is Roman Yossi for the 3rd consecutive week. The Predators captain and Crypto Knights star is on the who's hot list. He is sneaky reaching up to that Norris Trophy level right now. Him and Caleb McCarr I would say the 2 favorites right now, but 30.71 fantasy points in just 3 games this week. Guy had 9 assists and 9 points in those 3 games. Roman Yossi is completely on fire right now. Crypto Knights have a absolute stud in this defenseman. Yeah, I mean, just a monster last 3 weeks from Roman Yossi. Who knows if he does get the Norris Trophy nod, but really unbelievable, I guess, month of March, I guess it's been, that he's putting together right now. Next up on our list, we have Kyle Connor of the Red Army. 25.33 fantasy points in the last 3 games, 2 goals, 6 assists, and 8 points for the Winnipeg Jets star forward. Obviously, it's been a little bit rough year for Winnipeg, but he's had a fantastic season. He's top 10 in the NHL in points. Red Army has to be thrilled with production from the American-born Connor this season, having a great year as well. Next up on our Who's Hot list, Lawson Krause, 25.28 fantasy points in his last 4 games, 5 goals and 2 assists and 7 points for the Kamikaze forward. He had a hat trick this week that his father and I believe his grandmother actually called pregame, talking to one of the game analysts or whoever was there, one of the media members, saying that they felt that Lawson was due for a hat trick, and sure enough, I believe it was his 3rd NHL career hat trick. this week. So congratulations to him and congratulations to Kamikaze on a great week from their forward in Lawson Krause. Next up, we have Connor McDavid. I mean, here's a guy who could probably make this list most weeks. 24.18 fantasy points in his last 3 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, and 7 points for the Yetis superstar, Connor McDavid. I mean, it's going to be a interesting final month for the Edmonton Oilers here, and I'm sure the Yetis will be thrilled if McDavid turns it on now with the Oilers fighting and clawing for a playoff spot now. And I'm sure come playoff time, the Yetis would love to see McDavid get some playoff action as well for them. So Connor McDavid, obviously, the best player in hockey, but I think this next month, a super important month for him. And not only in the NHL level, but for the Yetis as well. And hopefully extending his season into the postseason for them and getting them more points in the playoffs. Next up, this guy is an absolute machine. Alexander Ovechkin, 21.95 fantasy points. He's now got, I think it's 40 goals now on the year. He had 4 goals and 1 assist and 5 points in the last 4 games. The Royals, this is the reason why this team is so good. They have superstars like this in their squad. Alexander Ovechkin, absolute stud, chasing down Wayne Gretzky. The Capitals are playing extremely well right now, right on the heels of both the Penguins and the Rangers in the Metropolitan Division standings. So, again, the Royals are looking for a big final month for Ovechkin as the Capitals look to push out of a wild card spot into a top 3 playoff matchup. And of course, the Royals are hoping for a solid playoff run from Alexander Ovechkin to help them in the playoff race as well. So another monster week for Alexander Ovechkin, who I believe he's just behind Chris Kreider and Austin Matthews now in the goal race, now that he's got number 40 on the season. And last on our list, we have Eric Calgreen, Calgreen. To be honest with you, I don't even know how to pronounce this guy's name. He's brand new. The new Maple Leafs goaltender, the Brutes goalie, 19.24 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He went 2-1 with a 2.38 goals allowed, a 9.33 save percentage. Guy came out of nowhere for the American Hockey League. Kind of took the league by storm this last week with 2 monster games. Is he the answer for Toronto in goal? Who the hell knows? They had a goalie that went on. They put Mrazek on waivers. They got Campbell on injured reserve. They had another guy they signed out of Europe that got taken on waivers, saved from Arizona. So who knows? Maybe Calgary could be the guy there. I think Campbell, when he comes back, Toronto made no moves for a goaltender today. So the Brutes might have just found themselves a sneaky starting goaltender here for the end of the season. And then, of course, if Toronto makes a run the playoffs, obviously a huge, huge plus there too. But interesting guy, came out of nowhere, not even having that big of a monster in the American Hockey League, but kind of taking the National Hockey League by storm, and also the UFHL as a leading goaltender this week. Now let's take a look at the who's not hot list. And to be honest, it was a little tough this week finding some guys who are not hot. This was a pretty good week for most players. But Oliver Ekman-Larsson, actually, he could have made this list last week as well. But a 1.67 fantasy points in his last 4 games. He contributed 0 goals, 0 assists, and a nice -4 rating there for Tornado's defenseman. Ekman-Larsson's not had a tremendous season this year. His first year there after a monster deal from the Coyotes to the Canucks. Canucks obviously have had some struggles this season, and a big part of that is his OEL's play. So not a good week for the Tornadoes defenseman. Not his best season, and like I said last week, he could have been on this list too. So not a good month so far for Ekman-Larsson. Next up on the list, we have Erik Karlsson. So 2.75 fantasy points in his last 4 games. He did add a goal, but he had 0 assists and a -5 rating. The North Stars defenseman. A rough week for Erik Karlsson. Sorry, that was my Siri for some reason going off for that. But 2.75 fantasy points. Not a great week there for Erik Karlsson. Next up, we have Neil Pionk, the former New York Ranger prospect, the guy who I was disappointed when the Rangers sent him away. The Yetis defenseman had only 2.75 fantasy points in the 3 games he played this week. He contributed 0 goals, 0 assists, and a -1 rating. But Pionk's having a good year. He's been a solid defenseman for the Jets. Unfortunately, they're not having a great season, like I said with Kyle Connor before. But Pionk has been a bright spot for them. The Yetis, I'm sure, are happy with the season and production they've seen from him, but just not a great week there for the Yetis young defenseman. And next up, I find no pleasure in this, but New Jersey Devils defenseman Dougie Hamilton, 3.23 fantasy points in the last 3 games, 0 goals and 1 assist, a -6 rating for the Duckman domination defenseman. A rough week for Dougie Hamilton. I actually saw this week TSN and someone else posted is Dougie Hamilton possibly the worst contract in hockey now, which is tough to see after just one season or just not even one season yet done in New Jersey signing that monster deal. But a rough week for Dougie Hamilton and Duckman domination there, who have had a very good bounce back and had a very active trade or I can't say trade deadline, but the last couple weeks have been very active in trades building for the future. And Dougie Hamilton is thought to be a huge piece of the future. So hopefully he gets it turned around there for Duckman's nomination. Next up, the only forward on our list, Sebastian Aho, the Carolina Hurricane star, only had 3.03 fantasy points in the 3 games he played this week. He got unfortunately ran into the brick wall. Alexander Georgiev, the Grizzlies goalie, had a 44 save shutout against the Hurricanes last night in a game that came out of nowhere. Georgiev's been struggling forever, and he had a Henrik Lundqvist-esque game last night, stopping 44 shots. I guess you can say Igor Shesterkin now, but unbelievable game. But the Rock Republic forward, unfortunately, in the 3 games this week, contributed 0 on the score sheet and a -1 plus-minus rating for the Rock Republic star. And last up on our Who's Not Hot list, Freddie Anderson, the Crypto Knights goaltender, just 0.80 fantasy points in the 2 games he started this week. Again, Freddie Anderson is another he didn't luck out last night with the Rangers. Let me tell you that. Georgiev with his 44 saves, he only faced I think 20 something shots, if that. So didn't do anything good for his fantasy points, but he did go 0-2. The 2.07 goals allowed is not a lot. Again, he only gave up 1 goal last night, but he did get the L, an .895 save percentage for the week. So unfortunately, Freddie Anderson is our Who's Not Hot goaltender of the week. The Kryptonites goalie unfortunately just ran into some stellar goaltending on the other side of him. And now let's take a look at our Elite Prospects Players of the Week. Your forward of the week is Red Army's Kyle Connor. Your defenseman of the week, again, I believe it is for the 3rd consecutive week, is Roman Josi of the Kryptonites. And Eric Kyle Green of the Brutes is your goaltender of the week. Like I said, taking the NHL and UFHL by storm. Congratulations to Red Army, the Kryptonites, and the Brutes on your 3 players being named to the Players of the Week, brought to you by Elite Prospects. And now what we've all been waiting for, let's bring in Mr. Insider Larry Fisher to talk over this insane trade deadline. Larry, since we last talked, we had 15 trades. We're now up to 7, I believe, on the day. I saw there might be controversy maybe swirling around, but 7 deadline deals. You had 13 guys on your big board get taken off. But the phone's been blowing up all day. I'm sure yours has been too. Insane day. Let's try to break it down.
Yeah, Kyle, busy day in both the NHL and the UFHL, busy week overall. As you mentioned, the deadline has now passed. Just as we're speaking, the deadline passed, and there was a late breaking trade that was 2 minutes too late, and that would have sent Mark Giordano, one of the franchise players for the Crypto Knights, who was on the move to Rock Republic. Unfortunately, 2 minutes too late is 2 minutes past the deadline, so the commissioner had to enforce the hard deadline and put the foot down, and that trade will not be going through. So Mark Giordano did not make the move to Rock Republic, which would have brought us to 8 trades today and 16 overall. But nonetheless, a very exciting day. Like I said, 13 names off the big board, Kyle. I was burning the midnight oil last night with all the late breaking trades going into the night. And we were at 8 trades last night, and I really thought there was potential for 3 to 5 more today, where we got 7 and 4 more names off the big board. So when you look at the big board updates, Kyle, and the players, we can kind of do an overarching view of the trade deadline before we get into the individual trades. But you look at the big board updates, you'll see the 9 names that were crossed off as of last night. And that was obviously Tanner Pearson, Michael Pizzetta, Brandon Tanev. A lot of interesting names there, guys that we were sort of expecting to be traded. Obviously, the Bo Horvat, Jeff Skinner trade was in the works. At last week's show, we sort of broke the news, and it did get completed. Vladimir Tarasenko on the move again last night. And then today, Kyle, the 4 new names. Braden Holtby, who was number 18 on the big board, just ahead of TJ Brody there. Mikhail Granlund, who was at number 21 on the big board. Craig Anderson was number 36, and Jason Zucker was number 57. So, like I said, 13 of 60 names on the big board crossed off this week. That's a pretty impressive showing for the insider, a little humble brag there. And it sounds like I'm not the only insider at the trade deadline. Sounds like you might have broke one in the real world or been involved in a breaking trade on the Rangers end.
Yeah, I got lucky. I got an inside tip on Andrew Kopp coming to the Rangers about 20 minutes before it came out. So I was lucky there. I have a very good source at one of the major networks that let me know, because they know obviously of my Ranger podcast. And so that was good. That was awesome to get that. And I was happy to bring it to Ranger fans. It's still, my phone's still blowing up from it. I'm getting DMs from people saying thank you. I did not make the trade. Chris Drury did. But yes, that was a little exciting to get my name thrown in there as a possible source of a Rangers trade. So that was fun today. But no, Larry, you are the king of breaking news here at the UFHL. I will not take that away from you. You are the man. Let's talk about some of these. Now, we had some breaking trades obviously today that just came in. We're filming this at the deadline. I mean, trades just came in now. So the first off I want to talk about is the Mystics and Dynasty making a trade involving Holtby.
Yeah, two guys. This one killed two birds with one stone, obviously, with Holtby going from the Mystics to the Dynasty in exchange for Jason Zucker. Both were on the big board. Bit of an interesting trade because obviously Dynasty has Aiden Hill and Dustin Tokarski. So now Braden Holtby's been on the IR lately, but he's going to play again this season. And when he comes back, they're going to have to make a decision. They have three's a crowd in the goalie crease, obviously, so they're going to have to waive somebody, whether it's Tokarski, most likely will be the odd man out, and they'll run with Aiden Hill and Braden Holtby. And for the Mystics, just, Dynasty's obviously hoping Braden Holtby's in a better spot next season, has a bounce back, and the Mystics are hoping the same with Jason Zucker, that he gets healthy and becomes sort of a key player for them. They have Evgeny Malkin, so they can pair those two. And yeah, goalies were, we had goalies on the big board throughout the big board, and we did see I guess 4 goalies move on deadline day, 3 of them that were on the big board. So that really helped as well. The second one was, or I guess he wasn't on the big board, but Chris Driedger, I always mess that name up. Going back to his WHL Calgary Hitman days, Chris Driedger, I believe, is on the move from the Stallions to the Mystics for a second round pick. And then the Stallions turned around and signed John Gillies, who's actually been up with New Jersey this season. Their affiliated scout had him. So they were able to move Chris Driedger, and they're going to run with Elvis Merzlikins and John Gillies down the stretch. Obviously, the Stallions are in that playoff race, trying to hold off the Godfathers for the final wildcard spot. So they moved Chris Driedger. And again, the Mystics, by moving Holtby, opened up a spot for Chris Driedger. And they have Linus Ullmark, and they do have Jeremy Swayman in waiting. So I think they want to run with that Boston tandem eventually. But for now, they have Chris Driedger in there as well, and there could be a market for him in the offseason. So some interesting goalie trades there. And then the third one on the goalie front, who was on the big board, was Craig Anderson. This was a real last minute one, a buzzer beater in the UFHL trade deadline. Arlo Schultz and the Stingrays wanted to upgrade on Eric Comrie, who doesn't get a lot of starts for Winnipeg. And Winnipeg's obviously going to ride Connor Hellebuck into the ground down the stretch to try and make a late playoff push. So they acquired Craig Anderson, who might give him a few more points. He's been playing pretty well for Buffalo. In exchange for Eric Comrie and Alexander Volkov as the extra piece there. And for the Snipers, they have Jack Campbell and Carey Price are their goaltenders going forward. Eric Comrie likely will be on preseason waivers unless they find a new home for him in the meantime, but or maybe on waivers if Carey Price returns it this season. And Jack Campbell, their crease, they need a body in the crease because both Campbell and Price are hurt, but they get Eric Comrie for now. They have some goaltending prospects coming as well, but they're looking to hopefully have healthy seasons from Campbell and Price as their tandem next season. And the Snipers are going to be running with 2 vets, Cam Talbot and Craig Anderson, down the stretch as they look to push their way. Hope they're going to try and catch the Grizzlies for 4th, maybe even challenge the top 3 if they can get some ground on West Coast Express, as they got a couple hundred points to make up there. But as we've seen in the standings, Kyle, give it 2 weeks and you can make up 150 points, which is basically what the Royals did on the Titans over the last 2 weeks. So things can change in a hurry in the UFHL, but certainly some musical chairs among goaltenders, including some names that were on the big board that we expected to move.
Yeah, I was not surprised by seeing the Snipers pick up a goaltender after the Marc-Andre Fleury deal in the NHL. Obviously, that impacts Cam Talbot and see what kind of playing time he sees down the stretch. Obviously, going from a almost an everyday starter to now possibly splitting time or even becoming a backup there. So I wasn't surprised to see them go after a goaltender there. It wouldn't be trade deadline day if it wasn't the Bentley Jacks making a monster deal. I think there's 8 guys involved in this deal, including draft picks and all. West Coast Express and Bentley Jacks, and obviously there's a guy in there that I have circled in my mind as he's in that deal. So let's hear about the deal with the Bentley Jacks and West Coast Express.
Yeah, so the Bentley Jacks are sending Mikhail Granlund, who is on the big board, along with Zdeno Chara and Scott Wedgwood to West Coast Express. Going the other way, the key piece was Nils Lundqvist, who obviously was highly touted with the Rangers coming in. That's your guy. Also, another good defense prospect, Alexei Hemosalmi, who was a second-round pick for Carolina this year. And then 3 pieces, Matt Nieto, Yaroslav Halak, and Vladislav Kamenov, who went back to Russia this year. As well as a second-round pick in 2024. But obviously, the big names are Mikhail Granlund and Nils Lundqvist would be the 2 premier names in that trade.
Yeah, that's a good return. I think that's a good return for them to get back. Obviously, Chara will help their defense down the stretch. Wedgwood, kind of a depth goaltender there, but Granlund is another good player there. So, but I think it was a good return for them. A smaller trade with Kamikaze and West Coast Express. Kamikaze making 2 deals today. We'll get into another deal with them. West Coast Express also making 2 deals today.
Yeah, West Coast Express busy. They got the bad news, which turned into they tried to make the most of it, was that Aaron Ekblad, obviously their star defenseman, on LTIR for the rest of the season. So suddenly they get some cap relief there. So they had the money, the cap space to go out and acquire Mikhail Granlund and to bring in a guy like Colin Miller. So on the back end, nobody's going to replace Aaron Ekblad. Certainly, Zdeno Chara at 40 plus years old isn't going to replace Aaron Ekblad, and nor is Colin Miller, who's obviously has a bigger contract and expiring contract, I believe. But certainly, kind of rental situations with Chara and Miller, just trying to fill that void, pick up as many fantasy points as possible from the ones that are lost by Aaron Ekblad as they continue to chase and try to challenge the Titans, challenge the Royals, and at least hold down that 3rd place overall. But certainly, West Coast Express tried to make the most of their unfortunate cap space from Aaron Ekblad going on LTIR.
Sorry, I just got an update. Morgan. I just got an update on the Andrew Kopp deal with the Rangers. Morgan Barron heading back to Winnipeg with a 1st-round conditional draft pick and a second.
There you go.
It looks like a 5th-round pick as well. So.
And I was wondering if Lundqvist was going to be in there. Yeah,
deals are still coming in. I knew Niels wasn't part of it, which is why I thought it was funny that he was traded in a deal in the UFHL. But deals are still coming in. This is obviously a busy day. Let's get to the second Kamikaze trade. A little bit more substance to this one. Some bigger names being dealt. Actually, the eliminators to Kamikaze. I mean, they pick up 2 solid players here. Going on their playoff run.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention the return for Colin Miller, going back to Kamikaze, Chicago defense prospect Ian Mitchell. So that was a nice return for a rental type guy in Colin Miller. And the Andrew Kopp talk, obviously he was a number 7, I believe, on the 7 or 8 on the big board for the UFHL as well. And that came right down to the wire. There was certainly some interest. And there's a lot of talk in the UFHL, Kyle, about extending the trade deadline 24 hours after the NHL to allow the UFHL franchises that 1-day window to react to any moves in the NHL, because now that Andrew Kopp's a Ranger, his value goes up. Maybe somebody who's a Rangers fan would have wanted to acquire him. So that's something to watch at the offseason meetings. It was proposed last summer, and it was voted down. It didn't get enough support. It had good support, but not enough support to extend that 24-hour window deadline. So it'll be interesting to see if that passes and if that changes a guy like Andrew Kopp potentially moving within that 24-hour window after the NHL trade deadline. But you mentioned another buzzer beater, and that was the eliminators in Kamikaze. Kamikaze acquiring Blake Coleman and Philippe Deneau, 2 guys that are looking good to, obviously, Coleman will make the playoffs with Calgary. Deneau's looking good with LA. In exchange for some younger guys, obviously, you'd expect the return for the eliminators. The key guy, in my opinion, Roby Jarventi, first pick of the second round for Ottawa a couple of years ago, scoring well in the AHL. That's a nice return as well. The cap space helps the Eliminators too, but they also take back Michael McLeod, who's having a decent year, Vladislav Nemesnikov, who's still sort of in the back end of his prime, and then another prospect, Oliver Kapanen, who is a second round pick from Montreal, and a second round pick from Rock Republic in 2024. So a decent return for the Eliminators, but certainly Kamikaze, as you mentioned, Kyle, they're in 10th place. There's less than 1 point from 10th to 12th. Those three teams, Kamikaze, Can West Generals, and Red Army, they're less than a point separating them. They're definitely going to be flipping back and forth every night for the foreseeable future. But Kamikaze would like to stay in that top 10, like to challenge Rock Republic in their friendly rivalry in the first round of the playoffs. Looks like they're on a collision course. So adding Blake Coleman and Philippe Deneau at the deadline is certainly a nice boost for Kamikaze.
Definitely a good pickup there. Our last deal of the day, that I guess was official. I guess we'll go over something here at the end of what might have. I don't know what we're gonna call that, a what could have been deal, I guess. But Cole Caulfield on the move. He's been a monster since Martin St. Louis has taken over there in Montreal. So a move for the future here and for the rest of the season there for the Snipers and the Godfathers.
And this move, a bit controversial as well, had a few people reach out about it. The franchises voted prior to the season, Kyle, to allow franchise-to-franchise trades and scout-to-scout trades that you could trade assets that your affiliated scout owns as a connected deal as long as the overall trade balances out. So you see the UFHL trade, Cole Caulfield for Mark Jankowski. Well, maybe Mark Jankowski 10 years ago when he was a first-round pick and had some hype around him, maybe that's a fair trade. But Mark Jankowski's been a waiver wire guy throughout the season in both the NHL and the UFHL. And obviously the Godfathers trying to catch the Stallions. Cole Caulfield gives them a huge boost down the stretch. So people are looking at that going, wait a minute, Cole Caulfield for Mark Jankowski, that's not fair. But then you have to look at the second part of the trade, the connecting part, which is the scout-to-scout trade, which was including big names like Cole Eiserman, Brody Zeimer, Sam Rinzel. Those are the three biggest names, but there was also, it was 7 prospects attached to Mark Jankowski, and Par Lindholm, who went back to Europe, was attached to Cole Caulfield in the big picture, in the overall. So it was Caulfield and Lindholm for Jankowski and 7 prospects. Cole Caulfield's the biggest name today. For people that don't know, Cole Eiserman, he's probably going to be a contender for first overall in 2024, certainly trending to be a top 3 pick there. One of the best American forwards in the, some compare him to a guy like Austin Matthews. Like he has the hype going. Cole Eiserman does. He's the next big thing for American forward prospects. So to see him involved sort of on a second level trade in the UFHL, that's why the Godfathers were able to acquire Cole Caulfield, is they're giving up some real elite talent for the future that now transfer over to the Snipers affiliated scout, Aaron Jones, who grabs, like I said, Cole Eiserman, Brody Zeimer. Sam Rinzel's the guy who's getting the high school defenseman. There's always 1 or 2 of them every year that sneak into that second round or get some first round talk. Sam Rinzel's that guy this year. So, and Brody Zeimer's another 2024 guy, I believe, 2023 guy that has had a really good year in Prince George here in the WHL and has a lot of first round hype as well. So, overall, that trade, again, it doesn't look fair in the UFHL. And how could you trade Cole Caulfield for Mark Jankowski? And why didn't the commissioner reject that? But when you consider those 7 prospects and an elite prospect like Cole Eiserman, it brings the trade into full circle and balances out overall, which, again, it's still kind of a controversial topic, whether that should be allowed in the UFHL or it should be UFHL specific trades. But the franchises did vote in this ability to make trades like this last offseason to utilize your scout assets to balance out trades within the UFHL.
Gotcha. I understand now. When I first saw the trade, I was like, what the heck's going on? And then, like you said, Iverson's name kind of sticks out because he's a guy in the U.S. we're hearing a lot about from his junior play and how good he's going to be. So, yeah, definitely interesting. And then do we want to address what possibly could have happened here at the end? Or there could have been a last-minute trade?
Yeah, we sort of talked about it off the top, but Mark Giordano was potentially going to Rock Republic from the Crypto Knights. But again, a hard deadline in the UFHL, as it is in the NHL, Kyle. If that paperwork's not filed by 3 p.m. Eastern in the NHL. Gary Bettman's not going to accept one 2 minutes late, 3 minutes late, 5 minutes late. The deadline is the deadline, and you got to make sure your fax machine's working perfectly on deadline day. And if it's not, then you're not going to get that trade through a couple minutes late. And same thing in the UFHL. You got to make sure your wallets are funded. You got to make sure you're on the right technology. If you're leaving it to the last minute and you're going to send a trade, and 3 trades, Kyle, came in, 3 of them came in right at the buzzer at 3 p.m. exactly, 3:00. So if there were 3 buzzer beaters, this one was 2 minutes late. But you got to get the deal in before the deadline. It's a hard deadline because you extended 2 minutes, and then like Commissioner Andrea Kranick said, it gets to be a slippery slope. Next year, it's 3 minutes. The year after, next thing you know, you're at 10 minutes. And then where do you draw that line? And in this case, it was an issue with the wallets weren't funded. When they went to submit the trade, they didn't have enough score coin, whether the price fluctuated or whatever. So they had to scramble and get score coin. So another thing here, Kyle, is always give the commissioner a heads up too. If the commissioner was notified prior to the deadline that, hey, we're trying to make this trade, we've agreed to it. Here's some screenshots of us agreeing to it. Make a Telegram group, whatever you got to do. Get the commissioner in there. Say this is a done deal. We're just waiting on score coin. As long as the commissioner knows about it before the deadline, then the commissioner can clarify it after the deadline. But in this case, the email came in, notification came into the commissioner's office 2 minutes late. And at that point, it was a hard deadline, even though they did have some proof that they agreed to it beforehand and wallets and stuff. But the big lesson here is that A, it's a hard deadline. And B, if you're planning to make moves on the trade deadline, get those wallets funded. Coin does fluctuate from hour to hour, minute to minute. So throw in an extra 50 score coin or an extra 100 score coin. Get that buffer in there in case there's some fluctuation, in case you're short on score coins. So you don't want to get negotiating down to the 11th, not even the 11th hour, to the last second, and then realize you don't have enough score coins. So when you wake up on the morning of the trade deadline, get that wallet funded. So if anything comes together before that deadline, you just have to click accept and away you go. So hard lesson learned for the Crypto Knights, as well as obviously Rock Republic was excited to bring Mark Giordano into the fold. And I won't elaborate on the full deal or the return. It was a 2-for-2 swap, but we could see that deal still go down in the offseason. They might revisit it. So we'll leave that to them. But certainly Mark Giordano was the big name, would have been going to Rock Republic to help them in their push back towards the top 5 and certainly on a playoff run now that he's with the Toronto Maple Leafs in the NHL.
Well, there you go. A lesson for all owners and GMs out there. Get your paperwork in order, okay? This is, no free rides here. All right, 3:00 deadline. But yeah, I mean, like you said, deals are coming into the last minute. Awesome day. But before today, we saw 8 trades go down since our last show. So let's talk about some of the big deals that went down. First, do you want to go over, I guess, just a week in general, how it played out, and how many rumors you were hearing going back and forth compared to your big board and all those names?
Yeah, and that's a good thing you brought that up, Kyle, is there was so much chatter, even since the deadline passed in these last 15 minutes. Like you said, my phone's blowing up the same way as yours, and you're much more connected in the NHL today. You probably know NHL trades that have happened that I don't even know about yet, because I've been so entrenched in the UFHL. I literally have, I saw Derek Brassard went to Edmonton. Somebody texted me that, but I'll probably find out 10 more trades in the NHL after the show today, because I'm a little behind on there. I've been so focused on the UFHL, but I have been getting DMs, including one I'll mention from Sean Cosgrove of the Warriors. He had a lot of interest in a guy like Devin Taves, had interest in flipping Keegan Kolsar, who he just acquired recently. But the Warriors decided to stand pat. The deals didn't get done. But just talking with Sean, he said that this was a great experience. You feel just like an NHL GM. Your phone's blowing up. Some guys are doing video conference calls. Some guys are actually talking on the phone. Some guys are just DMing, emailing. But yeah, all 30 franchises were in the war room throughout today, and several have reached out telling me, hey, I almost got this guy, or if we had another half hour, we would have got this guy. And again, that's why it's a hard deadline, because you let that go for 2 minutes, somebody else is going to say, hey, I would have closed this deal within 3 minutes, right? And not to say it's every excuse in the book, but there's always a reason why somebody's computer glitched, or there's always a reason, and I'm sure the NHL teams always have reasons too why they're trying to sneak one in a minute late or whatever. But it is a hard deadline, and we got to adhere to it, or it becomes a slippery slope. But certainly there was lots of trades that came close. I believe Andrew Kopp being one of them. The Outlaws certainly shopped him hard. I thought the Gators would with Ryan Schmelzer. They made that Jesper Boqvist deal. And the thing with the Gators, though, Kyle, is look at the standings. Every week they move up a spot. They gain, They're now within less than 100 points of sixth place. They just keep going and going. And again, we mentioned if that team was healthy, or that roster was healthy all season with McKinnon and everybody else, that's probably a 3, 4, 5 in that battle anyway. They're in the top 5 battling it out there based on the roster. So injuries were the reason they were set back. And again, trading a guy like JT Miller with another year left at $4.5 million. You look at their contract situation with McKinnon and Miller, that might be the best 1-2 punch in the UFHL as far as bang for your buck. So to trade JT Miller, same reason the Vancouver Canucks didn't trade him. You need, I know there was rumors of Alexis Lafreniere actually for JT Miller. Like that's the kind of package that Gators would have needed to pry away JT Miller. And certainly between Ryan Schmelzer and the Conacher brothers, Corey and Shane, nothing was going to take away JT Miller with the season he's having and the fact he's locked up for another year at that great price point. I don't think they were parting with him, but I was surprised the Gators maybe didn't make 1 or 2 more moves to really put their stamp on the franchise. But there's always the offseason, there's always next year. And with the roster that Matt Gunn largely constructed, I think they're still in a great position to A, climb the standings further and push towards that top 5, and B, potentially go on another playoff run. Because you'll remember, Kyle, the Gators were the finalists, the runner-up in the Klein Cup final last year, losing out to Red Army. So they're built for another strong run in the playoffs potentially this year, depending on how that playoff draft goes at the end of April, or likely May 1st playoff draft in the UFHL.
It's all coming up soon, Larry. Now that the trade deadline is quote unquote behind us, it is now playoff time. These teams have done some unbelievable work this past couple of weeks getting these teams ready. Let's talk about a couple of these deals that happened earlier. Now, we touched on this last week on a live breaking news, but it was official right after the show. Duckman Domination acquiring Bo Horvat and Jeff Skinner, the contract that we thought would never get sent away, gets traded back to the Stallions.
And these guys had me sweating a little bit, Kyle, because we broke this trade on UFHL Now, and it didn't actually become official until the next day. And I was starting to worry that one of them got cold feet. Maybe Ian watched the show and had second thoughts about taking on the Skinner contract, because that's always the risk when you make something public and me and you weigh in on it, and then Ian hasn't clicked accept yet. It's not official till he clicks accept. Did he have second thoughts? Did he get cold feet? Does he want more now? But obviously, the relationship that Ian and Dean have, being co-owners of East End and stuff, I felt confident enough about that trade to do it as breaking news, even though it hadn't been accepted. And like I said, it was a little iffy for a second there, wondering why it wasn't already ready to go at the end of the show kind of thing. But it did get done, and certainly I look at this trade. Jeff Skinner scored again last night. Bo Horvat had, I think, 2 goals and an assist in his Duckman's debut. This could really be a win-win trade. Arthur Kaliev joins, I think I called them the Triple K club in with the Los Angeles Kings. The Stallions already had Anze Kopitar and Rasmus Kupari, and now they have Arthur Kaliev, and of course they have Quentin Byfield too. So they have 3 Ks and a Q. If you're playing cards, that'd be a pretty good hand as far as 3 kings and a queen. But Anze Kopitar, Quentin Byfield, Rasmus Kupari, and now Arthur Kaliev are all members of the Stallions. The Kings are obviously expected to be a franchise or a team on the rise in the NHL, and they already are this year. I mean, they're second seed in the Pacific as of today. So certainly the Stallions are looking to ride the momentum into the future with the Kings. And as we talked about for Duckman's, quite the week they had, obviously landing Darcy Kemper and Bo Horvat as the new faces of their franchise in that previous week, sort of the vets to lead the youth movement. And they're really happy about having Bo Horvat as one of their top forwards going forward.
And Duckman's made another small trade as well early, right after that trade early in the week. A trade that made me a little nervous today. Shea Weber involved coming back to Duckman's from the Brutes, and TJ Brody going the other way with some coin there. But there was rumors all day today that Arizona was trying to acquire Shea Weber's contract to hit the ceiling. That could have been very dangerous for Duckman's, and that possibly could be something to keep an eye on towards the draft here, the NHL draft this summer, because it sounds like that deal might not be dead.
Yep, and you nailed it there, Kyle. I think that's why the Brutes wanted to get rid of or part with Shea Weber. Is obviously we expect him to be retired, kind of like the Chris Pronger situation, where his contract just gets kicked around to 5 different NHL teams. Whoever needs to reach the floor or needs the LTIR relief, there's still value in the contract as long as it exists, as long as he doesn't officially retire. But one thing I'll note is it's a bit of a blessing. You're right that Duckman said he didn't go to Arizona, because if he went to Arizona and they moved out Phil Kessel and a bunch of other guys, they were likely going to activate him to reach the floor. Although I think they were safe yet with guys like Louis Eriksson and Strawman and some of their big contracts, they probably wouldn't have needed the LTIR this year. But certainly for next year, the expectation is I think they only have like 5 players under contract or 7 players under contract for next season, like $20 million. They need $60 million to reach the floor or something. So they're going to be after guys like Weber and guys that they can leave on the active roster. And right now, the rule, Kyle, in the UFHL is no player can go on the LTIR in the UFHL unless they're on LTIR, officially on LTIR in the NHL. Well, Shea Weber obviously should be on LTIR in both leagues no matter what. But if they activated him to reach the cap floor, then Duckmans, you're right, would have had to activate him here. And that's a waste of almost $8 million in cap space. So a bit of a scary situation. And we'll talk more about LTIR in the next trade as well. But for the Brutes, they're still trying to chase down the Bentley Jacks and the Outlaws in that playoff race. And even though we're only 6 weeks to the end of the NHL regular season, Kyle, I did the math last night. There's over 600 NHL games to go. We've seen standings flip 150 points in 2 weeks. So Brutes are within 150 points of that final playoff spot. So getting a guy like TJ Brody, who's an active player, and getting some score coin, which obviously offsets the Shea Weber Legends League value that Duckmans were looking at to acquire him. Obviously, Duckmans likes the cap relief, but more than anything, you like the Legends League value as well there. So, and Duckmans, from their perspective, really wanted to dump that TJ Brody contract. 2 more years remaining at $5 million. And they were able to find a taker in the Brutes, with Jesse being a Leafs fan. And Jesse believes that Brody could be effective going forward if reunited with the guy we were just talking about, Mark Giordano, going to the Leafs. Obviously, Brody and Giordano were a pairing in Calgary. If they're reunited in Toronto, I think Brody's value might go up over these last 6 weeks as well, as Brutes try to chase down the Outlaws. But for Duckmans, yeah, they wanted to clear some cap space there. They obviously have a top 4, which you mentioned Dougie Hamilton, who didn't have a great week, but projects to be a big part of their future, $9 million man. They also have Colton Parayko at $6.5 million, Joel Edmondson at $3.5, and Travis Hamonic, who was traded to Ottawa this weekend at $3 million, is kind of their top 4, with Philip Broberg expected to be on the active roster, should be a regular for Edmonton next season as well. So when you look at it from both sides, even though it's kind of a strange trade, Shea Weber at the trade deadline, for an active guy like TJ Brody, it did make sense for Duckmans to dump Brody's contract and to take back that Weber contract, assuming, again, Kyle, that the offseason meetings in the UFHL, I believe it's going to be proposed that the UFHL moves to their own LTIR system. Same rules as the NHL, but it would be up to the UFHL franchise whether or not the player goes on LTIR, unlike being reliant on the NHL, because the guy we're going to talk about next certainly is an LTIR example who's not on the LTIR in the NHL. And there are a few of those where franchises are handcuffed because the NHL team doesn't need the cap relief. They don't need the space, so they don't bother wasting their time with the paperwork to put him on LTIR. But here, the guy in the UFHL is missing a guy for 6 weeks or 6 months or whatever it is, rest of the season, and they can't get the cap relief because they don't have Ron Francis's phone number to let him know to please put Brandon Tanev on LTIR so we can get the cap relief here in the UFHL. So looking into the offseason and again, talking about Shea Weber potentially going to Arizona, that risk may be nullified for Duckmans, because even if Arizona activates him and has him on the active roster, taking up a spot and taking up $8 million of their cap, there may be a rule coming in, if voted in the UFHL by the franchises, that UFHL would have their own separate LTIR system where Duckmans essentially could keep Shea Weber on the LTIR within the UFHL, even if he's on the active roster in the NHL. So that'll be an interesting conversation in the offseason. I do expect it'll get a lot of support, and it needs 22 out of 32 votes, 2/3 of expected majority, in order to be implemented in the UFHL with the own LTIR system. Otherwise, you potentially run into the risk, like you said, of Shea Weber being on an active roster and not being able to put him on the LTIR in the UFHL.
Now, you alluded to it, Brandon Tanev. Now, the Brutes made 3 deals this week before the trade deadline day. The national saga that is Tanev trade is over. The guy's been on the trade block since before the league was even formed, I feel like. So he finally gets dealt from the Royals to the Brutes. The Royals get much needed cap space there. That's what they wanted, been looking for. They also got a first round pick back and Joey Keane, a guy who came up in the Rangers organization, a very solid two-way defenseman there. So what do you got on this one? And obviously, the Tanev saga has been an ongoing inside joke in the league, and I was cracking up when I saw the deal finally go through.
Yeah, your Twitter poll of the week. I don't know if it ended up that Brandon Tanev was the leader, but he was on there, and it was sort of the running joke. And it looks like he's the guy that is going to be the winner as far as guys that were traded, because I think it was Braden Point, Alex Pietrangelo, and Phil Kessel were the other three, and Brandon Tanev was the only one of the four that got traded. But you're right, long running joke in the UFHL. And again, I don't think the Royals wanted to trade Brandon Tanev, but they really needed the cap space, and they couldn't put him on LTIR, so they were shopping him hard. But they have a love-hate thing going on with Brandon Tanev, I think, internally. He was on the trade deadline, Kyle, prior to last year's trade deadline, or on the trade block. So it's well over a year now that Brandon Tanev's name's been out there, and they've announced many times they're close, but they never part with that franchise player. So they finally pulled the trigger, and like you said, it was out of necessity in this case. Alex Edler was actually returning from LTIR, and with Seattle not utilizing the LTIR for Tanev, as we mentioned, the Royals would have been over the cap with Edler's return. They had to make room for Edler, and it was non-negotiable. He was back that night, so they had to get a deal done. They would have been over the cap, which would have obviously been, if you're non-compliant, then you don't collect any fantasy points, which would be huge for the Royals to be losing fantasy points against the Titans. So they had to make the move, and I'm actually surprised they got a first-round pick and the return they did, because the Brutes were aware of that. The Brutes reached out and said, "Hey, what's the deal here? Like, how many hours do they have? Like, they got to make a move within 24 hours. Is it prior to tomorrow's game? What is it?" So they were aware of the situation, and they could have maybe forced. This is almost one of those situations you look back in the NHL where managers have got caught in a bind, and they've had to give up value in order to get rid of somebody. So the Brutes almost could have hardballed Arnie here and said, "We need Brandon Tanev and a first for a second round pick just to help you out of this mess or out of this sticky situation." But the Brutes, I don't think the Brutes were the only bidder, and that's what Arnie said as well. The Brutes could have done that. I reached out to Arnie and had a couple good laughs. So he said, "Well, they could have done that, but I had about 4 or 5 other franchises that were willing to give somewhat similar packages that are looking to next year." And Brandon Tanev at $3.5 million for 3 more years is with the scoring system in the UFHL with hits and shots and some of those categories that he hits, he is a fairly valuable player as a middle six forward in the UFHL. So the Brutes look into the future by bringing in Brandon Tanev, but certainly paid a fairly steep price with Joey Keane in a first-round pick.
He checks a lot of boxes. Honestly, I think it's a good deal for both teams. I think both teams got probably exactly what they wanted, which at the end, you kind of root that both teams win, right? You kind of hope that both teams win. You don't want to see trades where guys regret and get talked about. The Brutes weren't done. They also made a deal with the Eliminators as well, involving a first-round pick and Tanner Pearson.
Yeah, Brutes were one of the busiest franchises at the deadline. Jesse Gill, very active leading up to the deadline. Again, as mentioned, they're within that 120 points of the Bentley Jacks. The Outlaws aren't necessarily out of reach there in the wild card race for the Legends Conference. So although Brandon Tanev's the next year move, they had TJ Brody, and now you have Tanner Pearson added in this deal. Gave up another first-round pick. They had 2 first-round picks in this year's draft, and they gave them both up to add pieces that are to the active roster for next season, but also to hopefully get a little bit of a push and get maybe overtake the Godfathers, get one extra spot higher in the payouts. Because again, the UFHL has payout revenue sharing type payout system for the regular season. All 32 franchises get a payout. So if the Brutes can overtake the Godfathers, then they'll get a little bit of a bump in the payout as well. And they recoup some score coin here too, going forward for budget stuff, which they also did in the TJ Brody deal. So some tidy business by Jesse Gill and the Brutes, but Tanner Pearson certainly is a guy that can help down the stretch. And again, going into next year, you look at, I mentioned Tanev has 3 more seasons at 3.5 and Tanner Pearson has 2 more seasons at 3.25. So you're getting 2 middle six forwards for just under $7 million. Pretty cost controlled investment for the Brutes. And certainly for the Eliminators, again, trying to retool for the future, add another first-round pick. You saw what they did with Roby Jarventi in the previous deal by selling on Blake Coleman and Philip Deneau. Here they got rid of Tanner Pearson, so they're getting younger. They previously acquired Alexander Holtz, was their big blockbuster ahead of the deadline. So New general manager with the Eliminators in Tall. He's really looking to the future and trying to put some younger pieces in place. Philip Hallander could still make the NHL. He's sort of a bit of a fringe prospect now, even though he was a high pick a number of years ago. He's going to try and make it in Pittsburgh's system. He's back there again. But overall, Tanner Pearson, I think, is another nice ad for the Brutes looking to next season. If they can stay healthy next year, I think they're going to be right back in that playoff race in the Orr division.
And the Brutes also might have found a goaltender here in Eric Kalgren, who has taken, like I said, my who's hot list. He was the goaltender of the week in the UFHL, and he's kind of taken the both leagues, NHL and the UFHL, by storm this last week. All of a sudden, appearing out of nowhere. So who knows? Maybe they found something there in a goaltender. But Warriors and Snipers make a pretty big deal here too. Ivan Prokhorov is the big name here. Going from the Warriors to the Snipers.
Yeah, a couple more blockbusters that came through on the weekend, Kyle. This one, again, the Snipers back-to-back weeks, they surprised the insider. Last week, they got Nicholas Backstrom. Didn't know last week, sorry, they traded away Nicholas Backstrom. Didn't know Nicholas Backstrom was available from the Snipers. And this week, they land Ivan Provorov from the Warriors and wasn't aware that Ivan Provorov's name was out there. I knew there was talk of Ivan Provorov in the NHL about the Flyers and that he may be looking for a fresh start somewhere else, but didn't realize that had a trickle-down effect to the UFHL and that Sean Cosgrove and the Warriors were willing to trade Ivan Provorov, but certainly he's a big-name guy that should bounce back next season, whether it's in Philly or somewhere else. Also acquired a first-round pick for 2024, a couple years down the road, in exchange for, and again, the Warriors looking to get deeper here. When you look at their roster, Marcus Pettersson, who's obviously in Pittsburgh, not on the level of Ivan Provorov, but Keegan Kolesar, another one of those guys like Brandon Tanev, who hits a lot of categories in the UFHL. As mentioned, there was some interest in Kolesar after the Warriors acquired him, that there was potential to flip him. That might have been part of the plan. And then John Leonard's been up with San Jose lately again. A guy who had a really good college career, who can score and potentially produce in the NHL. And Matthew Phillips, a really undersized guy who's one of the AHL's leading scorers. So Leonard and Phillips, I believe both are no longer waiver exempt going into next season. Phillips already isn't, and Leonard won't be. So the Warriors are going to have some interesting roster decisions, but they are rostering guys like Adam Brooks and Dylan Sakura and Jaden Helbowatz, Jake Lesishin, Adam Ruzicka. They'll have to make room for Owen Tippett now that he's in Philly. He's no longer waiver exempt next season, Owen Tippett. And they also have Martin Pospisil, who's no longer waiver exempt next season. So it's a crowded depth chart with the Warriors, but these past couple of weeks, they've really been trying to add some prospects or some guys that they believe are going to be in the NHL next season that can help their depth. So obviously they're looking at that, thinking that Leonard and Phillips are potentially upgrades on guys like Dylan Sakura heading into next season. So we saw previously they had waived Sam Lafferty, acquired Henrik Bjorkstrom. So this has sort of been the dealings of the Warriors down towards the deadline, is accumulating depth and having that next man up, which is so important in the UFHL. If you can have John Leonard and Matthew Phillips on your protected list, they clear preseason waivers and they're in the NHL next season, then they're just a phone call away to bring them up to the active roster. And the franchises that have that feeder system from their protected list to offset injuries tend to be the playoff franchises when you look at the UFHL standings. So maximizing your man games is important, and I think that's what the Warriors are looking to do here by acquiring a couple guys that they think will be in the NHL next season, although they didn't get back that one stud piece in order to give up a guy like Ivan Provorov. It was more of a quantity package, but in the Warriors' eyes, quantity is what they need going forward to have that depth that's going to be necessary to be a playoff team in the UFHL and in that Lemieux division.
We also had a Rock Republican Assassins with a blockbuster trade as well. For the second time this year, we see Vladimir Tarasenko on the move. A guy who I feel like he's had a good bounce back season this year after some trade requests last year, after last offseason and everything else. Nino Niederreiter is the big name going back there. Interesting trade, I think, for both teams.
Yeah, swap of volume shooters, guys that shoot the puck a ton and are decent goal scorers. Interesting when you look at the contracts as well. You got Niederreiter's a pending UFA, $5.25 million, so he could cash in with a strong playoff performance for Carolina. This being a contract year, he'll want to have a good finishing kick to the season and into the playoffs. Tarasenko, On the other hand, 1 year left at 7.5 million. He'll be motivated next season for a contract year. And you look at the Assassins, they're going to miss the playoffs this season, so they're going to get a motivated Tarasenko next year. Whereas Rock Republic, they're in the playoff picture and they're going to be going for it. So they're getting a guy in Niederreiter that they hope is a real impact player for Carolina in the playoffs. And maybe they think Carolina is going to go further in the playoffs than St. Louis. So you're acquiring a guy like Niederreiter who's going to take you further in the playoffs, give you a better chance in the Klein Cup playoffs. And then you get a guy like Grigory Denisenko, obviously, who is a 15th overall pick from 2018. He kind of has the potential to almost be a Tarasenko type player in the years to come. So it'll be interesting to see if Denisenko can pan out, whether he makes it in Florida or ends up getting traded like Owen Tippett. But certainly Denisenko is a guy to watch for the for Rock Republic's future. And Rock Republic's done a good job of that without spending through the entry auction. They've been able to acquire top prospects in trades, and they add another one here in Grigory Denisenko. And for the Assassins, David Ferentz is an undersized defenseman. Nashville is great at producing D, and he's got some good offensive ability as well, sort of like a Zach Jones in the Rangers system. So I think he could be a sneaky ad there as well. But overall, I think that's a very fair trade when you look at the size of it as sort of a 6-for-6 block or a 3-for-3 blockbuster, 7 assets involved in total. Looks like a very fair trade to me on paper with, like I said, the key pieces being Tarasenko for Niederreiter.
We had 2 small trades to run over real quick before we jump into some of our, some of your midseason ratings here for prospects. But Outlaws and Bentley Jacks make a small deal involving former New York Ranger legend Jack Johnson.
Yeah, just some depth defenders on the move. Like you see in the NHL, every point counts down the stretch, and everybody has a reason for making that one last move. Here you see Spencer Stastny, who's another smaller offensive defenseman in Nashville's system, prospect who came through the program in the U.S., going for a more established veteran guy in Jack Johnson. The Outlaws adding another depth defender, as we mentioned, who's with Colorado, could be on their playoff roster. And then the other trade that was similar in nature was Mark Pysyk from the Battlehawks to the Red Army in exchange for Michael Pezzetta. We had Michael Pezzetta on the big board. We knew his name was out there as potentially moving, and they swapped him to the Battlehawks for Mark Pysyk. And I believe that trade just came down to roster spots. Just with guys getting healthy and stuff, Battlehawks needed to move out a defenseman, and Red Army was willing to move out a forward like Pezzetta because they have guys like Zegras and Raymond and Lafreniere, and they have a lot of young guys that are on the protected list that can come up. So they had room they had Janice Moser's young defenseman get hurt, so they were able to bring in Mark Pysyk, and then in return they were able to send out Michael Pezzetta. And the Red Army actually claimed Will Butcher off waivers as well, because again they're a bit banged up on the blue line. So Mark Pysyk and Will Butcher end up with Red Army, and Michael Pezzetta back to the Battlehawks, who are hopefully going to get healthier down the stretch, because they've sort of fallen out of that top 10 race. The Battlehawks were in the top 10 not so long ago. I think they have a half dozen regulars on the IR right now. So pretty decimated, but they're hoping to get healthy. In the meantime, they hope a guy like Michael Pezzetta chips in some fantasy points and keeps them certainly keeps them ahead of the Stallions as far as the first wild card in the Allen Conference.
So last week we talked about the UFHL prospects, any hockey prospects in general we were talking about. And you have your midseason rating coming out. You've gone through 6 different scouts and agencies to build the top 10 ratings. So I think this comes out tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're hoping to get it published for tomorrow. That's the plan. It's the second edition of the UFFS rankings this season. We do preliminary rankings, which came out way back on November 11th. So it's been a while. There's been 4 months of hockey played since. And we wanted to get the midseason rankings out, Kyle, prior to the CHL Top Prospects game, which is on Wednesday in Kitchener, Ontario. A big showcase. You want to avoid that recency bias. But we can start with my personal top 10 prospects for 2022. As you can see here, the difference between mine and the UFFS midseason rankings is basically the Slovaks. Where the UFFS rankings have Nemec at number 2 and Slavkovsky at number 4. I have them flipped. And for me, again, maybe a bit of recency bias there, but every time I've seen Slavkovsky play, he's been a man among boys, even playing in the Liga and the Finnish Pro League. And then you put him on the Olympic stage and he scores 7 goals in as many games, 2 goals in the the bronze medal game, including the winning goal for Slovakia there. He's really emerged as potentially the one guy that could challenge Shane Wright, in my opinion.
He was a standout at the Olympics. He was very good. He jumped off the screen at you too. So I like that. I like that for you there. Shane Wright, number one for both you and the consensus standings. I think that's probably a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, it has tightened up again when you go out and win the Olympic MVP award and have 7 goals in as many games against a bunch of former NHL players. It opens eyes. I think Slavkovsky's in the conversation. I think Logan Cooley's the guy who's had a great year for the program. That under 18 Worlds coming up in April is always such an important showcase for a guy like Cooley and the program. They've played together all year. They're going to show up there, so that's going to be if he can really outshine on that stage, maybe he becomes a legitimate challenger as well. And then, I mean, right defensemen in the NHL, we know how important they are. And Simon Nemec is going to be a guy that plays all situations and takes a bunch of minutes. I don't think he's on the Owen Power level as far as overall impact for an NHL team, but certainly a top defenseman. Here you see the UFFS midseason rankings. As mentioned, Nemec is number 2 and Slavkovsky's number 4. Those flipped. The only other things and really minor things, the one name on my top 10 that didn't make the cut for the overall consensus or consolidated rankings was I had Jonathan Lekaramäki in my top 10 over David Jirasek. So I had the Swedish forward instead of a Czechia defender. And the way that worked out, I had Jirasek at number 11. So again, it's just a spot here, a spot there. I was a couple spots higher on Savoy and Lambert and a couple spots lower on Kemmel and Yurov. But essentially, very close. The one name you'll notice that's not on the list, Kyle, is Ivan Miroshnichenko, the Russian forward who is projected to be the top Russian forward in this class, ahead of Danila Yurov. I personally had Miroshnichenko at number 7 on my list for these mid-season rankings. We had decided to omit him because he's had some health concerns in the real world. With some cancer type stuff. So obviously his hockey playing future is a bit in doubt for now, and he's shut down for the season at least. So we wish all the best for Ivan Miroshnichenko, but out of respect, rather than ranking him lower than his talent deserves, that he's going to be 30th or 60th or whatever, we decided he's still a top 10 talent. It's impossible to predict where he's going to go in the draft because of the health concerns. So we just omitted him from these rankings. But generally speaking, he was still and when asking the 6 scouts that were contributors to the rankings, generally speaking, he was still going to be in that top 10 somewhere on most of the lists.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate situation. Obviously, it's come to light in the last couple recent weeks that that's come out. That news has come out, and obviously, you never want that for anyone, especially a kid in their draft year with their future ahead of them in the hockey world. But like you said, wish him all the best, and not only his hockey future, but his health future as well. Well, Larry, a lot of stuff this week. Busy. I don't know what we're going to do next week when we don't have our phones blowing up. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign out for the week?
Yeah, with the rankings, just sort of did a by the numbers as well. Just sort of took a look at how, so we got 6 different contributors. Everybody submitted their top 64. I'll actually reveal my top 128. So I went 4 rounds deep for these midseason rankings, but we only counted my top 64 and everybody else's top 64. When you go through, cross-reference all the lists, 5 prospects were consensus top 10. They were in the top 10 on all 6 lists. 4 of those 5 were in the top 7 on all 6 lists. So there is a bit of a consensus about at least 4 prospects being in the top 7, 5 of them being in the top 10. And then first round, and all these numbers were up a little from the preliminary rankings, which is what you would expect because the scouts get more sure of things as the season goes along. You're more confident in your rankings, and prospects do sort of establish themselves more. But 17 consensus first rounders, so essentially 16 would be half the first round. We're at 17 prospects that were in the top 32 on all 6 lists. 35 consensus top 64. We only went 2 rounds deep because that's how the UFHL entry auction is 2 rounds. It's 64 spots they bid on. The winning bidder gets to select their preferred prospect. And these rankings, Kyle, actually are applied to an algorithm that kind of determine or project the minimum bids for that entry auction. And then we do a final rankings in June. And then obviously the actual NHL draft results, the selection order in the NHL will determine that finalize that algorithm for the franchise as far as what the minimum bids will be for each of the 64 spots. But lastly, there are 105 different prospects ranked in the top 64. So when you counted up all the prospects that appeared at least once on the 6 lists from the 6 different scouts that contributed, there was 105 different names, different prospects were ranked in the top 64. So lots to chew on there today. And tomorrow you get to wake up and see the full list. And anybody who's a draft junkie is looking forward to this week with the CHL Top Prospects game. And there will be more rankings coming out. We had Craig Button contribute his rankings, but we used his rankings from January 12th, which was still sort of a midseason ranking for him. But he's going to have an updated one this week as well, potentially tomorrow or Wednesday, the day of the Top Prospects game. So that'll be interesting to look forward to. Sam Cosentino, another scout with UFFS, released his March rankings this past week ahead of the Top Prospects game, and certainly Elite Prospects, EP Rinkside. We use their top 64 as well, a partner. Very grateful to have Peter Sibner and JD Burke and the EP team as part of UFFS. So we included their top 64 as well, which was just released on the weekend. So a lot of fresh rankings, including some new ones from Nick Utley of Wild West Scouting and the ITTM In the Trenches management team, which consists of Gabe Foley, Marcus Borkowski, and Aaron Jones / Alex LeBlanc, husband-wife tandem there. But they all submitted rankings, and I think when I look at the rankings, the 105 prospects that were ranked, but the top 64 and the first round, top 32, top 10, I really think we have an impressive group of scouts working for UFFS, working that open market every day, but obviously paying attention to the top end of the draft and tracking prospects throughout, obviously tracking the draft with Dean Millard and Craig Button as well. But I look at that list and I'm pretty proud to be the director of scouting for UFFS, seeing how all these prospects were ranked by our internal scouts, and excited to release that list tomorrow because I think it'll hold up fairly well through the under 18 Worlds, through the Memorial Cup, and until we do our final rankings. I like the way the current top 64 shakes out for UFFS scouts.
Yeah, great work on that. Great work on everything, Larry. Go catch a nap. It's been a long couple of days, I know. And yeah, unbelievable work. Where is this being posted so everyone knows where to find it?
Yeah, so we'll be sharing it throughout social media tomorrow. We'll have it pinned at follow UFHL_scouting. We'll announce it there and have it pinned. We'll put it throughout our Telegram communities. If you're not in our Telegram community, definitely reach out DM on Twitter and we'll get you added in there. But certainly it'll be promoted heavily on Twitter, and it will be published on the actual UFFsports.com site. And if you go to hockey.uffsports.com and go to the news section, you'll have direct access to it there as well. So excited to get these midseason rankings out and get some feedback, but I'm really happy with the way they turned out.
Awesome stuff. Larry, thank you as always. Like I said, pencils down, go breathe, go turn your phone off for an hour. Awesome job. Thank you for all your hard work, not only on the insider stuff, but also on the tracking the draft and the prospect work as well.
Sounds good, Kyle, and congrats again on nailing Andrew Kopp. That's it's a big one for you. So congrats on being the NHL insider today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a good pickup for my Rangers. I'm very happy about that deal. It was a good day overall for Chris Drury in his first trade deadline.
Right on. No, looking forward to seeing how these players perform for their new franchises in the UFHL going forward now, Kyle, because you look at guys like Mark Giordano moves, or anybody that moved in the NHL, what's the impact going to be in the UFHL? And that's something we can look at next week as who's been hot with their new franchise. Maybe the who's hot is who's the hottest guys with new teams and who's helping their getting a boost in the UFHL thanks to a change of scenery in the NHL. So lots of intrigue for the final 6 weeks of the regular season with so many players changing teams both in the UFHL and in the NHL.
And actually just came in, I'll tell you this as we're live here. It looks like Cal Clutterbuck and Zach Parise are signing extensions with the Islanders, which will obviously impact the UFHL and their owners here, as they are both getting looks like 2-year extensions. So not on the move, but obviously almost more of an impact now as pending UFAs will now be extended. It looks like Clutterbuck's could be a 2-year at a 175. Parise, similar deal in the same neighborhood. So interesting for their owners to see both those players get locked up.
Yeah, it's a full cap league, full salary cap league. So yeah, managing the cap is half the battle, and being aware of all your players' contract statuses, when they expire, when they renew. When they're no longer waiver exempt, all that stuff. You really are an NHL general manager when you're in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. So I'm sure a lot of franchise owners and GMs and scouts are glued to their phones this week, coming out of the trade deadline as well, because there's still going to be a lot more news between now and the end of the regular season.
Yeah, busy day. Larry, thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
Sounds good, Kyle.
Oh man, what a week. What a week, what a day. Exciting stuff. The UFHL is now can now turn to the playoff race. It should be unbelievable, like Larry was saying. So many teams right on each other's tail there. I think 9 through 12, like we said during the standings, only 100 points separate those two. Only 46 points separate the top two teams. There was deals made left and right today. We don't have a Twitter poll, unfortunately, this week. There's just so much stuff going on with the deals that we were just trying to focus on what was going on, who's getting traded where. So we apologize for that, but make sure, like Larry said, go check out the UFS scouting department there on the prospects coming out. Here you go. So the UFHL _scouting at twitter.com. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for when the prospect ratings do drop there, and make sure you do follow the UFHL. All the trades that were made today are all posted there. You can actually go on to each trade and vote for who you think got the better end of the deal. So you don't have to just take mine and Larry's word for it when we break it down. You can go on there and vote yourself to let the teams know and the league know who you think won those trades. So make sure you go check out all the social media there. And thanks for tuning in this week. We'll see you next week.
The following is a production of the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network.